Hi, everybody. Welcome to Enduring Minds podcast, part of the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network. I'm one of your hosts, Evan Birch, and I'll be joined shortly by Jason Bahamundi and Aum Gandhi. Here on Enduring Minds is where we explore the intersection of mental health and endurance sports, while breaking the silence and stigma surrounding men's mental health. We're here to have real, open, honest, and vulnerable conversations, sharing the struggles, victories, and everything in between that shapes who we are. So leave any shame, guilt, and fear at the door and join us for another episode of Enduring Minds. If you're new here, we kicked off the first 3 episodes by introducing the three of us as hosts. You can find those episodes on the Run, Try, Bike YouTube channel and on the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network, wherever you get your podcasts, alongside 8 other incredible shows. Please subscribe, rate, and review. Tell your barista, tell your Uber driver. It all helps us grow the podcast and be able to tell more incredible stories. And in saying that, I would like to welcome Jason and Aum to the show. What's good, guys?
Hey, what's up, Evan? Good to have you, man.
Hey, Evan.
Thanks for taking care of the intro. It was awesome.
Oh man, sweaty palms. Yeah, sweaty palms.
Knees weak.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely.
I was happy to be in the background, just listening and not having to have my own sweaty palms and weak knees.
Yeah, that's fair. Awesome. So on today's episode, we are excited to be joined by the one and only Ray Zahab. Ray is actually my coach and mentor, and few people embody the spirit of resilience quite like Ray. He's a world-class explorer, ultra-endurance athlete, father, husband. He has pushed the limits of human potential, running across the Sahara, the Atacama, the Arctic, Death Valley, and many more. Some of the truly harshest environments on Earth, all while using his expeditions to inspire and impact people in positive ways. Ray is a fierce advocate for resilience, having not only faced extreme landscapes, but also personal battles, including a blood cancer diagnosis and a past that once saw him trapped in unhealthy habits, proving that transformation is always possible and that we can do hard things. Ray, welcome to Enduring Minds.
Be here today. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of the podcast, guys. It's an honor, and I think it's a subject that's very important to speak about, right? And I think that what you're doing is really some groundbreaking stuff here. I think it's really exciting for people to hear different stories that maybe, from the edge they haven't heard before. So anyhow, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks, Ray. So we have a bunch of questions. We typically go off the questions, and then by the second question, we just kind of go with the flow. So
Sure.
I'm going to open things up with the first question for you. People often think of endurance as a physical trait, but battling cancer is a different kind of endurance altogether. How did facing your own mortality shift your perspective on adventures, family, and what truly matters to you?
That's a really great question, Evan. I think that for me, on this journey that I've been on, there's been several, and I'm going to use the word, and I know it's totally corny, but I have to, there's been several epiphanies that I've had along the way. And I think by the time I ended up, 2 years ago, essentially, with a diagnosis of this rare form of blood cancer that was going to require 6 months of chemo and monoclonal therapy and blah, 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 just to knock it into remission because there's no cure. By that point, I'd already arrived at the destination of the mindset that this was a space that I was going to have to just basically own. I'm here. What the hell am I going to do? I mean, I earned the right to sit on the couch, eat a bag of chips, and hang out and binge watch Netflix or whatever, my favorite shows or something like that. And spend my 6 months doing that. And they're rightful. I mean, we all make our decisions. I could have. But I instead, through all the steps along the way, all the things that I've learned along the way, I thought to myself, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going into this thing full bore, and I am going to essentially, and this is how it happened, I am going to go do my treatments, which make me feel horrible, spend a few days recovering, and then start training again and go to some amazing place in the world, do something, that made me feel good and made me feel like I was getting myself as fit as I possibly could for the next rounds of chemo. So that was how I played out the 6 months that I went through. And then I came out the other end of that, of course, I guess you could say more resilient. I mean, I just came out the other end of it, not ever during the process feeling, oh shit, this sucks, but instead feeling like, and I'm not belittling it, but it made me feel like, okay, this is like another expedition. This is like another adventure. And I've had close calls in the past. I've been able to get through them, and I've learned from every single mistake I've made along the way to make myself stronger. Maybe it was to prepare for this. I don't know, but here I am. I got through it, and I came out stronger on the other end.
I have a follow-up question to this because I shared with Evan and Aum that my father passed away from cancer when I was 23 years old. He was a week shy of his 50th birthday. And as I came upon my own 50th birthday last year, like I was panicked. I was like, holy shit, I'm coming up on my 50th birthday. My father didn't make it to 50. I got past it, and I celebrated the day after my birthday, probably more than I celebrated my actual birthday because I made it one day past my father's lifespan. And I think about it still when I turned 51, I was like, okay, I made it there. So when you think about like sort of the anniversary of the diagnosis and going through these processes, how does that impact you mentally? Is it an opportunity for you to sort of celebrate getting past it, or do you take inventory of your life? Like, what do you do when you come upon those dates in your life?
Yeah, I don't even think about it. To be honest with you, I can't remember the exact day on the calendar that I got a diagnosis. I can't remember the exact day of my last day of chemo. I can't, this will come back someday for sure with a certainty. I don't think about that at all. I'm too busy. If I've learned anything in this 56 years that I've been kicking around, is that we spend so much time trying to control things that are kind of out of our control. And we spend so much time worrying about the future, what may or may not happen, instead of being present and aware of what's going on us right now. And I once was given really great advice by someone many years ago, and it took me a long time to figure out that they were right, that life is kind of like, getting on a highway with your car, and as you're getting on that on-ramp, you're aware of the cars that are behind you. You're looking in your rear view mirror. You're looking at your life past, right? But you're glancing, and you're occasionally glancing to the future because you have a goal of getting down the highway and getting on the highway safely and not dying. And essentially, I've tried to live my life in that way. And with this, as it relates to this cancer, as it relates to everything, I, in the second 30 years of my life, have decided that I'm going to focus on those things that bring me happiness, even the little things on a day-to-day basis, making a good cup of coffee, or, my daughters are having a good day, or whatever, and be stoked about that. And then there's the bigger picture stuff, like the expeditions I do or my work, and being pumped about that too, and having goals, but I'm not consumed by the future and what may or may not happen. I try to be present. Does that make sense? I mean, it's kind of all over the map, but that's how I look at things.
It makes total sense. And I wrote down two notes as you were talking. One is celebrate the small wins, which is something I actually posted about a few days ago, right? We need to celebrate those small wins because they get us to the bigger picture. But the thing that I wrote down first was perspective. And I think that's what you have given us in this conversation already, is perspective about life, and stop trying to hold on so tight to what it is that is around us right now, and enjoy and embrace even the challenges and the obstacles that are going to come our way, because they're going to come our way, right? Nobody gets through this life with unicorns and rainbows on a daily basis. So I appreciate the answer. Thank you. I'll turn it over.
And you know what, to bookend that, if I might interrupt and say, we live in a time when we are consistently bombarded with 30-second bits of information. There's 5 million things happening at once. You're on Instagram, you're seeing all these lives that appear to be perfect and everything, and you're challenged in that way, and over here this is happening over here, and the world is falling apart and everything. You have one life. You only have one. It's not a video game. It's not like you get a second one and a third one. I mean, you have one life. So to waste it being so enraptured by what may or may not happen in your life is I feel a disservice to oneself, right? And life, let's be honest, we all have our ups and downs. I mean, it can suck at one moment, it can be amazing in the next, but overwhelmingly, life is an amazing thing. And the fact that we get to have one at all, is pretty rad. And so for that reason, I go back to, keeping the stoke high. And any day that you're 6 feet up instead of 6 feet under the ground is a good day. I wish I was 6 feet, not quite.
I was about to say I'm only 5'6", but I'll take it.
5'8". So there you go.
I mean, I had, just like as is the case always in these conversations, I always have a question and then I end up having another question. And you brought up social media and being bombarded with information and comparisons. As somebody who has really made themselves part of the process and enjoying the experience and celebrating the small wins, do you ever find yourself as somebody who maintains that social media presence caught up in that game of comparison? And how do you manage those feelings and expectations?
You know what? I'm very fortunate in my job so I do 3 things: expeditions professionally. I run a nonprofit of which I'm a volunteer in, which I know you guys are going to ask me about later, Impossible to Possible. I have a guiding company / coffee company, and I get to speak at events around the world. And there's something that I've noticed across all of the platforms, all of the things that I do, whether I'm engaging with people that are top of their game in sport, the arts. I've worked a lot, in television and film, in the arts, or in business, or in any of these realms. The commonality is there's a comfort level when someone reaches that point in their life where they are comfortable with themselves and they are willing to be, what's the word I'm looking for? You're willing to be vulnerable in one aspect. You're not afraid necessarily of failure. Again, a buddy of mine taught me the acronym: there's no fail, there's only first attempt in learning. But you're willing to take those chances to learn a little bit. You become very comfortable, and really you get into this point of not giving a shit. You're so busy doing your own thing that I love celebrating the success of others. I love seeing Evan go out and kill it in an ultra or achieve his goal and do it brilliantly and be applauded for it. So that gets me really stoked. I'm not affected adversely necessarily by what I see in social media, but I'm also an old man. So you get to a point also where you're like, what the hell? Here I am, I'm still doing my thing. I got to be grateful for that. And that's the end of it. But I find that social media is a double-edged sword. Being, obviously the founder of a nonprofit that takes 16 to 21-year-olds on expeditions all over the world, you're engaging with young people a lot. I have 2 daughters that are 16 and 13. Social media enables us to learn about the world, connect with people we otherwise wouldn't have, et cetera, et cetera. But on the other end of it, as you had mentioned, it's also a window into unrealistic expectations, things that aren't necessarily true, all sorts of propaganda. I mean, you name it, right? And so I think it's if we're able to utilize social media in a way that is effective for us, it can be a growth tool. But if we become consumed by social media, I think it can be detrimental to one's mental health and by virtue of that, physical health.
Yeah, Ray, that's been the trap for even myself coming onto Instagram and thinking, hey, I want to be a part of some brands to help pay for my running addiction, we'll call it, to do these things. And I think it is a slippery slope of, should you be checking your screen time before you actually open the app to be like, oh man, I was actually on there longer than I ever expected to? Maybe that'll stop yourself from doing it. But the fact that we have to even put those things in place to stop us shows us how addictive and, I guess, obsessive we can become with these things. Now, I do want to come back to the presence piece that you were talking about, because I unfortunately had a friend that recently passed away. And you talk about, impossible to possible, coffee company, expeditions, ultra running, family, all of these things. And his quote was, life is too short to only do one thing. And I just hear you living life to the fullest every single day in everything that you're doing, and acting through your values through all of the aspects that you are a part of. And I think, being a fellow girl dad, I have two girls myself, 7 and I guess she turns 10 tomorrow. So how, yeah, how has being a father really shaped you? I know you said it's one of your proudest accomplishments. And how has it changed your perspective on risk, endurance, and the way you really approach your adventures now? Like, what was it like before kids? What was it like after kids?
Great question. So the first 30 years of my life, I was very risk adverse, right? I was so afraid of trying new things and taking on challenges, and for fear of failure or what other people would think of me when I for certain failed, and these sorts of things, right? The second 30 years of my life, I made a promise to myself in those early days that I would take on challenges. I would be willing to take risks. I would be willing to try things, maybe fall flat, pick myself up and move on. And that what others thought of those outcomes was less important than what I thought of those outcomes, because the great things that we achieve in life are very relative to us as individuals. I tell people this all the time. It's my belief that, what you do. I've spoken to people that have ran their first 5K, and they get out there and it feels like they've broke the 2-hour marathon. I mean, it's just an amazing feeling for that person. And it's very hard for them to describe exactly what it means to them, in the same way that the most difficult things that we do in our lives are relative to us as individuals. So if you're going through something and it's extremely difficult, the person sitting beside you might say, oh, that's easy. I could do that. No problem. I get over that right away, but not for you. So life is individual perspectives. And for me, early days, back in the old days, I always wanted to be a dad. I knew that. I always wanted to be a dad. That would be, and I just never thought it was going to happen for me. Because of lifestyle and everything else, I thought, well, that's never going to happen. I can be the crazy uncle to my brother's kids and all that stuff, right? But it's never going to happen. And it did. And it's not one of the greatest achievements in my life. It is the greatest thing that ever happened, period, in my life, was having my daughters. Even though it's World War III in this house sometimes, and there's times when you're pulling your hair out, the good times make it completely worth everything. And I do a lot of adventures with my daughters, as you know, Evan. I've told you lots about. So we go all over the world. We do crazy trips and all kinds of gnarly backcountry running and camping and all kinds of stuff. And both my daughters are really great athletes. They're Nordic skiers, biathletes, flat water kayakers, and sprint canoers. They do all this stuff. From a perspective of risk, has it changed? Well, I don't take myself too seriously. I take what I do very seriously. So if I'm planning an expedition, like my next expedition to the Arctic, we spend years planning these things, whether I'm solo or I'm with a team. I spend years planning these expeditions. And I plan my expeditions, as a matter of fact, more than I plan my trips to the grocery store, right? I really am involved in that. But my risk level, or my ability to take risk, obviously it's an equation. It's part of the equation. I have a family and I've had close calls. But at the same time, I'm so well planned when I'm going on these expeditions. It's my job and I'm going to do it right. Now, the perspective from my family of what I do, I may as well work in a box factory as far as my kids are concerned. There's nothing. I have a filing cabinet, and in that filing cabinet is all the magazine articles, the Guinness record, the medals, all this jazz is tucked away. My house it's nothing to do with even my wife, Kathy. She's an ultra runner and she's, done really well in her races and all of this jazz. None of our awards, none of the things I do are on walls. It's about their successes and the perspective of the things that they're doing. And instead, I try to be a good dad to them and do things with them and grow with them. And as I learned from my buddy Richard Weber, who's an amazing Arctic explorer, we went to the South Pole together in 2009. And Richard's boys grew up to be amazing men. And I said, Richard, what's the secret? And he's like, dude, do tons of stuff with your kids. This was before I had kids because I knew I wanted to do tons of stuff with your kids. That's what I do. I do a lot of stuff with my daughters. Things are in perspective. As far as they're concerned, I have a regular job. Dad goes away. It's a month. I take very good care, lots of logistics doing what I do, but I mitigate risk. And I know that's a long way around to the question, but there you go.
I appreciate you going into that, and you sort of answered what a quick follow-up thought I had as I was taking some notes. And I realized that I want to ask, you've done these adventures both without kids and with your kids. How is it different? And how is the experience for you when you're able to share it with your own kids and to be able to pass on that knowledge and that insight?
I'd say it's a great question. And I, sort of following up on what Evan was asking, forgive me for leaving that part out, but the expeditions, when I'm doing trips, I've done 40 expeditions. I think 2 were pre-kids, 38 have been with kids. And then obviously all the ultra marathons I used to do and all that was pre-kids. My expeditions, my experiences are richer because I'm taking a perspective in many of these places where I'm at, where I'm meeting people, connecting with people in super remote places. And I'm taking the perspective as a father. And so also I come back, I have another reason to come back, right? I have another reason to come home and share stories, right? With my daughters of who I've met, or, I got stung by a scorpion or whatever, right? Like they love all the stories. And, there's nothing gets me more stoked than when they're stoked to hear about the stories.
Yeah, I resonate so deeply with it. And I think we've talked about this before too, Ray, that, your kids just gravitated towards those things because they saw you doing what you loved and they just wanted to be a part of that. And I've seen that with my own girls, not pushing them into any sort of running and them asking me last year if they can come out for a run on the weekend. And that is honestly the best 5K I have ever ran that first day. Every time they ask me for that 5K on a Sunday, I could give up all my training that week and not care about anything else. And if I get that 5K in, that made my week.
Oh yeah. Like my oldest daughter, she races at the provincial level sprint kayak. I'm not a kayaker. I'm never on the water. I got nothing to do with water, but she's a sprint guy and she loves it. And I've often said to my buddies, I'm like, man, if I could just retire right now and constantly follow her, as I go to all her races, just follow her around, be the sponsor, whatever, just be support crew and do nothing else for the rest of my life. I would be stoked just to do that. Because seeing them grow in their own passions. That's the other thing too. My daughters both have their own passions that my wife, Kathy, and I have nothing to do with. We don't do what they do. They're biathletes. They ski and shoot, so it's not, something that we do.
Yeah, absolutely.
I got technical difficulties. I got to take the mute off. So the smile that comes to your face when you're talking about your kids, clearly it's joyful for you. And so we talk a lot about mental health struggles and the heavy-handedness of it all. So one of the things I want to do is sort of flip the script and keep talking about this joy, and outside of your kids and hey, I'd give up all of my career to be with them. What are other things that, make you feel most alive mentally and at peace today, especially in retrospect to where you've come from?
It's the simpler things. right? I mean, again, in my prior life, first 30 years, when I'm, smoking a pack a day, Evan knows my background, smoking a pack a day, unhealthy guy. It's kind of I don't want to say it's the typical ultra running story, but it really is quite common in ultra running that people transform their lives and they go on and they do other things. And I spent those first 30 years of my life feeling inside very unfulfilled and unhappy and directionless. And I'll be honest with you, we all have good days. I'm not saying, hey, everything's coming up roses every day. It's like we're talking skewing positive or skewing negative, right? I mean, that's the way it goes. And, negativity and unhappiness is like a warm sleeping bag in the Arctic. It's very easy to get into and get all cuddled, warm and cuddling and not get out because you don't want to get out. Being happy is something you actually have to work on a consistent basis, right? And you can't have happiness without a little bit of sadness. You can't have, it's like you can't have a room. There's no such thing as light if you don't have darkness, right? So you got to have these things to balance each other out. It's just that, the first 30 years of my life, I'd wake up in the morning. If it was cloudy outside, I'd say, oh shit, it's probably going to rain. Now I wake up, if it's cloudy outside, I'm like, well, maybe I don't have to wear a hat on my run today, right? So it's a different perspective. It's perspective. And so I feel like over the years, my perspective and where I find happiness comes from smaller things on a day-to-day basis than these grander things that I thought would be the only things that would make me happy. Achieving the next big thing or doing this thing, that's not really where the happiness comes from. The happiness comes from, having an espresso with my buddies and laughing about something stupid, or going away for 2 days trail running with my wife, or whatever, right? It's the random things in life that make us happy. Now, I will say this. In 2007, when we ran across the Sahara Desert, Charlie, Kevin, and I, over the course of that 111 days, as we were meeting people in Niger and Mali, I mean, very sporadically, but meeting people way out there in the desert, in these very, very small 100 people, remote communities, I saw and learned from people that there is a true and authentic joy that is derived from being healthy, having good food, and having your family around you, right? And I remember that, and it never left me in the Sahara. And as I, went on the path and then had kids and I've come to realize full circle that truly that's where you get your most happiness from. It's right. Having a great meal that day, the smaller things like we talked about before, and those smaller moments, those interactions with those people who are absolutely those relationships that you have with those people who are the absolute closest to you.
Yeah, what I'm hearing, Ray, and I just want to distill it down is, we have this ideal or belief that we have to pursue happiness, and everything that I'm hearing is like happiness isn't something you choose; it's something that happens to you because of what you've chosen. And I think like that's like such a cool space to come at it from, and not think like, yeah, I want to be happy. Of course, everybody wants that. But if you're actively just like pursuing that thing, it comes back to a video that I saw this morning. I was talking about this principle of have, be, and do. And, all of us want to have, those moments and those things. We all want to be that, but we don't want to do the things that like get us there. We want the doing to come after. So it's like if you flip those and you go like, I want to do the things that make me the person that I want to be so I can have the things that I want in life. And that's such a like when I saw that video, and that's what kind of rung for me just in hearing you speak, is like that pursuit of happiness. It's a little bit of a misnomer in my mind of, pursuing it usually means that you're just like, it's like that carrot and a stick. That's just like you can't quite grab it because you're so focused on it, and coming back to that presence piece, like being present in that moment. So it's, yeah, I don't know what you think about that.
I would agree with most of that. I would say that you do have to work at being happy, though. It's, you have to practice being happy, like truly happy, like to be really in your life present and happy, you have to work at it, because the negativity is going to slip in there. I mean, that's going to happen. Everybody, goes through things in their lives, right? And so it's, do you allow yourself to be consumed by these things? Or sometimes it's inescapable. It's just the reality, right? But we can also try,
So, as you were talking about your experiences in those, in some of those environments in the Saharan,
Mhm.
in some of the harshest environments you've been to, I've done the Everest Ultra and been to the Himalayas. I've been to the rainforest and had these experiences, and I was smiling ear to ear when you were talking about the simple things in life and seeing people smile. And I think about the Sherpas, and I think about just smiling over a simple tomato soup after a long day out on the trail. And I think about the kids and the kids in Pia Copata in Peru just playing with a plastic bottle and kicking it around like a soccer ball and smiling and having fun. And um, it just it makes me wonder, when you go to these harsh environments, do they help? Going back to perspective, do having those experiences and seeing those people enjoying life in with those simple things help you put into perspective your own journey of trying to find happiness and trying to build happiness?
Yeah, that's just like, when I was in the Sahara in '07, spending time with people out in the desert, in these remote communities, and gaining perspective, not it's got nothing to do with economics or how where a country's GDP is. It's got nothing to do with that. It has to do with a greater knowledge that some people have of life, and sharing that knowledge. And I was infused at that time with something that it's in all of us, but I didn't know it at the time until I was there. And I was like, wait a sec. Okay, now, you know what? I get what's important, and it's not perhaps what I think it is. It may be something else. And for me, it's not for everybody, but for me, it turned out that the something else was correct. Right. So, but life is a series of experiences. And I go back to that first thing where I was saying, you've got this one life to experience as much as you possibly can, to meet as many people, if you choose so, as you possibly can, and to learn from others and never be afraid of learning along that entire journey. Because the more you learn and the more you experience, the product of who you are is constantly evolving all the way to the end,
This is a great segue to a question I was thinking of as you were talking earlier. Is you're creating a boatload of memories all along the way, all of these different scenarios that you find yourself in with your kids, with your wife, with expeditions, with all of the different things that you do. And I'm wondering, when do you stop to take inventory of those memories? Are there moments where you're like, I'm going to go maybe meditate, or I'm going to go sit, and be by myself and reflect, so that you can continue to enhance the thought process about perspective? Because oftentimes we can get so hung up on doing the next thing that we forget about the thing that we just did. And so I wonder, how do you take inventory of all the memories that you've been creating?
I think it happens for me in my case. This might sound weird, but it's just kind of subconscious. It's just always there. There's no beginning and end. There's no timeline. It's just a big, this big ball of hair that's in my head. And all of these events are non-chronological. I'm writing a book. It's actually my third book. I'm working on it right now with a friend. And like I said, 40 expeditions. And like, if I go back to running the Sahara, I remember every day that we were out there. It's like it was yesterday. And I can't remember. It feels like, was that before I ran across the Atacama or after? And it's because it was many years before, but they all feel like they're on a similar timeline. So there's no deep leap into the past, nor do I dwell on the past. or rest on laurels, as they say, or you know what I'm saying? It's just a collective of experiences that continue to move along. And as far as that next goal that's happening, again, I'm not fixated on the goal. I have the goal and I prepare properly for it. And I'm very good at preparing for things because I have a lot of experience preparing for things. That's my jam, but it's not, it doesn't consume me, if that makes sense.
100%. I'm going to turn it over to Evan in a second, but as you were talking and giving that response, I thought about like how the memories come back to me and sometimes the emotional grasp it can have, right? Like that finish line that you crossed or that nap that you took in the middle of a 200-mile trek and the feeling that I get. And it just goes back to something that Lori and I say all the time, which is live a good story. And that's exactly what you're doing. You're living a good story, and there will be something that triggers that memory that will bring a big smile to your face, or maybe sometimes tears as well. Like those things are, that's
when
life.
I'm out in trail running, I live in a 4-season climate in Quebec. It's true 4 seasons. Like the summer here, it's 1 billion degrees and humid. It's like being in the jungle. The winter, we got half a meter of snow yesterday or something, and it's super cold. So at any rate, I'll be out on the trails with my daughters, and it smells that will really, and all of a sudden I'll catch the smell. I say, oh my God. I said, girls, can you smell that? And they're like, yeah, what? I said, no, smell that is what the Amazon smells like. I'll tell them. That's exactly what it's about. And without that smell, you know what I'm saying? It takes me right to a specific place in the Amazon where I first smelled it. But once the smell's gone, I completely forget the scenario. So there is that trigger, I would say. But more often than not, or I've been in places where, I've been on an Arctic expedition, completely non-related to anywhere else I am. But the Arctic in the middle of winter, when I'm on these expeditions, it looks like the desert. If you squint your eyes, it looks like you're in the Sahara Desert. And I'll say, oh my God, that rock is exactly like a rock that I saw in the Sahara. And it'll take me back to that rock, and I know where that rock is. You know what I mean? So I do have those moments, but yeah.
Yeah, that's, I think about you sharing about being on the trails with your girls and the smells. And I can guarantee you those are those seeds that you're planting that future time in their life, when they smell that, they're going to remember being on that trail with you, which is such a cool experience. I saw a video of a dad who's saying every time he gets into a car with his kids, he has a playlist and he plays the same 20 songs over and over again. And the kids absolutely hate it. They're like younger kids. And everybody asks him, like, why do you do it? They absolutely hate it. He goes, because when I'm not here and they hear those songs come on, they're going to remember the times that we had in the cars and our talks that we had. And that's like, those are those senses that like are so visceral. So I just wanted to kind of comment on that before I go into my next question here. So like, you've spent so much time in some of like truly the harshest environments in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I can imagine during those times you have a lot of solitude. Sometimes these are solo expeditions, sometimes these are with people. But do you find that during certain times that thoughts creep in harder when you're by yourself versus with others? And kind of what advice would you give to people? I mean, a lot of people who tune in do run ultra races. We are endurance athletes, and we have those times when we're alone. What advice would you give to people for those moments that they find themselves in those difficult times and those difficult environments for them? Like you said, that it's all relative in perspective for them. Like when they find themselves in that last 10K of an ultra and they're in their harshest environment that they've ever been in, what would you say to that?
Well, you know what? I think an interesting underpoint is that as human beings, we typically underestimate ourselves physically, mentally, emotionally. As individuals, we underestimate ourselves. So if you're training for a marathon and you step off a curb and you crank your ankle, your training's done that day and you may not train the rest of the week. I mean, you'll be limping around. Okay, reverse, go back in time. It didn't happen. You're in the marathon. You're in the marathon that you trained for. You step off the same curve, twist the ankle exactly the same way. And you're like, son of a bitch, it's just killing. But you finish the marathon. You rise to the challenge. And when the game is on, we can really rise to a different level, right? I mean, that's the amazing thing about human beings. So when I'm doing these things, first of all, I know now, after all these years, I'm probably capable of more than I think I am. I can get through this thing. That's number one. Number two, I remind myself when the shit hits the fan and it starts getting uncomfortable out there, and I start feeling a little sorry for myself because my feet are killing me, or I'm exhausted, dehydrated, hypothermic, whatever. I remind myself that I chose to be here. I chose to do this. It's not like someone forced me to do it. I wanted to do this thing, right? And so to embrace and own, all of what this is right now, the good and the bad. And that's how you get through it, right? You accept where you are in the moment, figure out how you're going to take those next steps, remind yourself you're there to do it, and you can do a hell of a lot more than you think you can.
Ray, it has been a phenomenal time chatting with you. We do have a segment of the podcast that we typically end with, which is called Stop, Start, Continue. It's based on a Japanese tradition of misogi. At its core, misogi is about transformation, shedding old habits, beliefs, and ideas, embracing and letting in new and more powerful versions of yourself while letting go and surrendering in order to grow. So I'm going to pose this to you. Stop. If you had to choose one mental or emotional habit you want to leave behind this year, what would it be and why?
One habit, did you say? Mental habit?
One mental or emotional habit, yes.
Wow, that's a tough one. I think maybe that's a really tough one because it's one that's very insightful. So I'm trying to think of the exact right one. What would I leave behind? I think maybe my absolute willingness to do anything, because that could be dangerous. So I think I would leave that one behind.
That's a great answer. And I'm glad you followed up with why, because I was about to ask you why. So let's jump to the start one. If you were to commit to a radical mental shift this year that would force you to grow in new ways, what would that be and why?
To grow in new ways, a mental shift to grow in new ways. I think I would try to be more introspective with my time, because I can wake up at 4:00. It doesn't matter. I can go to bed at midnight, wake up at 1:00, and there's never enough time to do everything that I need to. So I would become a better manager and steward of my time, like I do on my expeditions. Everything's mapped out minute by minute. But when I'm at home, it's like a bomb went off, like a time bomb went, like a bomb of time. Like it's just a disaster. So I think I'd fix that.
As they say, right, a messy desk is the sign of a clear mind. So, you obviously must have a clear mind then. The last one is continue. If you had to symbolically cleanse or renew one aspect of your mental health in the next year, what would that be?
Renew, like keep it going? Oh, I would say my
Yes.
resilience. For sure. Because I feel like I thrive during adversity, certain adversities, but there's certain adversities that I still find very difficult, right? If my kids are going through a hard time, I find that very difficult. It takes an emotional toll on me. So, to be able to become more resilient in that aspect too, instead of, hanging on to it too much, letting go of that a little bit.
I appreciate the answers, and I know our audience is going to get a lot out of that. So I thank you very much for those responses.
Yeah, Ray, just to close things out here. So first, thank you for your vulnerability and your willingness to share the deeper parts of your story. I'm sure there's questions that you would love to be asked that we've hopefully asked today about family, work, all the expeditions, everything you're doing. And I don't know if you knew, but when I first started ultra running, before I even knew you, I had your quote on my Strava that said, ultra running is 90% mental, the other 10% is in your head. And they always say, like, don't meet your heroes, never do that. And like your mentorship and guidance as my coach, friend, everything. I'm deeply grateful for. It's funny to just see this come full circle, to have you on a podcast that I'm hosting with Jason and Aum, and to have that, it's truly special. So I wanted to thank you for that. Do you have any final
Well,
thoughts?
I think it's funny, for your audience to know that, like, I'm friends with Evan's wife, Cassie, and been friends with her for years. Never even knew he existed. No, I'm just kidding. I heard about him all the time. And she was like, "Hey, can you Evan, my husband Evan's running an ultra. Can you, talk with him one day?" I said, "I'd love to talk with him." Now, I never talk to Cassie. Evan and I talk all the time. And so I got to talk to Cassie the other day for the first time. So it's interesting, you'll have these friends and they introduce you to others, and there you go. It's great.
Yeah.
It's an honor.
Do you have any final thoughts, words of wisdom, or a story you want to leave us with?
Well, I would say I would remind people that, I'll get these messages now and then, and it'll be, "Hey, I want to run a marathon, or I want to run a 10K. How do I get started?" And I remind everybody, pun intended, everything starts with the first step. And everybody has goals and everybody has things they want to achieve in life, but to just slow down for a minute, take stock of where you're at, build a plan, and don't try to, as tacky as this is, build Rome in a day. Just get out there, one step at a time. As a matter of fact, very specifically, so this one person, "How do I run a 5K?" And I said, "How much running do you do, Herman?" I don't do anything. I've just been sitting on the couch. I don't do any exercise. I said, "Okay. Do you own a pair of running shoes?" They said, "No, but I have sandals that I can walk in." This was in the summer. I said, "Okay. Put your sandals on tomorrow morning, walk to the end of your laneway, and then walk back and take your sandals off, go sit on the couch. Next day, get up, put your sandals on, walk to the end of your laneway, hang a left, go a block, turn around, come back." They're like, "Well, I can do that now." I said, "No, but you got to build a sequence. You got to build a habit. You got to build a set of behaviors in order to start achieving that next goal." After you get to a point where you can walk to your local running store, buy your shoes, throw the sandals out there, walk home in your running shoes. Congratulations. Now you're a walker, and now you start adding in your running. You know what I mean? So it's like building that healthy habit and that sequence in life. And it applies to absolutely everything.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, it speaks to ultra running in general. I mean, the quote that comes to mind for me is, "Don't try to boil the ocean." And that's
Yeah.
right. Like that's
Or
what
how
it
do
is.
you eat an elephant?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? We tell the
One,
kids this all the time, right?
one
You know?
bite at a time.
I'll tell you what, I'd eat that whole elephant. Some days after a long run, I could eat that whole elephant.
Absolutely. So I want to thank the audience for joining us on Enduring Minds episode 4. We are a proud part of the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network with one of 9 incredible shows. We are one of 9 incredible shows. So please subscribe, review, rate. Like I said, tell your barista, tell your Uber driver, as it will allow us to continue to bring incredible guests like Ray and their captivating stories to our community. Our next episode will feature Toby Oler on February 25th. So tune in for that. You don't want to miss that one. Incredible story from Toby. And until next time, let's continue going the distance and breaking the silence together.